Welcome to a tale of frustration, triumph, a little bit more frustration, and ultimately a beautiful end product. Now, if it wasn't clear what exactly we're going to be building here today, it's time to start the coffee table build. Now, this one's been on my radar for a little while, and I'm actually speaking to you from the present. We'll go back to the past and how this all came together in a minute. But I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory ahead of time. My wife and I had found a coffee table on Facebook Marketplace that seemed to fit our needs. We refinished it and had it in our living room for a bit. But ultimately, we had more grand ideas of what we wanted in our space. So I went over to Fusion and designed up this design. It pulls some inspiration from mid-century modern types of furniture and ultimately fits our space a little bit better. So with all that out of the way, let's go back in time to see how this all got started. To start off this build, I began by breaking down the 8-quarter red oak I had gotten for the top and bottom pieces, knowing that these would require the most amount of work. Once cut, I planed all of the boards down to 1.5 inches. And yes, I recognize that that's a lot of planing, but it's better than the planned thickness of 1.25 inches. With everything planed, I broke out both jointing sleds and, using some double-sided tape and ingenuity, joined both of them together to clean up one edge of each board. I then sent each board back through the table saw to get them to the same width. Now that I've got my boards cut down to the rough size that I need and squared up to the best of my ability with the tools that I have, I'm gonna go ahead and start gluing and clamping these guys together to create my panels for the upper and lower portions of the table. Now to do that, because my setup for table saw and planer aren't necessarily the best to keep things nice and level and smooth and such, I went out and got a couple of these Rockler panel clamps. I think they're going to help out a lot in trying to keep all of these boards from twisting on me and creating areas that I'm going to have to plane down later. It's just going to create a hopefully smoother environment to work with these boards once they have been turned into panels. So I'm going to go ahead and get this panel glued up, and since I only have 2 of these clamps, we're going to have to do that second one in a little bit, probably tomorrow or whenever I can get back to this. It's going to be a multi-day process. It's all part of the fun of woodworking. Let's get into this. With the panels waiting for the next steps, I turned my attention to cutting down the 4-quarter red oak board I'd gotten to create the side pieces, as well as some of the lower frame parts. Now the final pieces I need to cut out of my oak supply are the legs. And to do that, I'm gonna be creating a template, using that template to then cut out everything from the oak. I've already gone ahead and printed out a 2-scale version of the table leg design. I'm gonna cut that out of plywood using my jigsaw because I sold my bandsaw recently and the new one that I was looking at is currently back ordered. So we're pivoting to plan B. Should be fine. I'll clean everything up with the sander. I think we'll be good to go. But I'll use that to create my template, cut out my blanks from these 2 pieces of oak, and then I'll use a patterning bit on my router table to get everything nice and finished. Let's see how this goes. After cutting out the template, I began milling down the last of the 8/4 rota pieces I had to get the blanks I would use to create the legs. Now things have been going so well up until this point. It's really hard to see anything son of a... Well, I guess it's time to get that bandsaw. So it's a new day, and I've already hit a stopping point. So let me catch you up where things are at. In my last working session, as you guys saw, I cut out the table legs. I've already gone through and cut down my plywood centerpieces for the dividers of the table. I've got all of my small oak pieces piled up, ready to go, labeled. That's good. So then I started getting back to work on my panels here. I had left these kind of rough cut just to make sure that, you know, when I was gluing up, I didn't have to pay attention to squaring things up, all that stuff. That's fine. And then I also had to go through and fill in all of the gaps between some of these boards. Totally fine. Then I went to start cutting these down to the proper size. And that's when I realized that this board in front of me had cuts. It's been raining here for the past several days, so the moisture content in the air has been elevated. And being that I work in a garage that's not necessarily weatherproofed as perfectly as I would like, we're just at the mercy of what's going on outside, which is totally fine. Just got to work with it. But a bit of an annoyance on this guy. Luckily, the bottom part of the table seems like it's okay. Checked it, doesn't seem like it's cupping, but this guy is definitely going to need a little bit of fixing. For that, I'm just going to wet down either and let it sit out overnight on the table saw workbench. Hopefully that'll flatten it out and get back to work tomorrow. But a bit of a bummer because I was very much looking forward to starting to build this guy up. So again, we wait. Hopefully this works. Hopefully this works.
3 days later.
My method for trying to flatten out the top panel didn't quite work. So I'm stepping up my game a little bit. I've got it back in the panel clamps. And I've got some wet paper towels or wet shop rags on top, trying to retain the moisture, hopefully allow those wood fibers that are cupping on me to relax a little bit and bring everything back to flat. But we'll see how that goes. I'm just gonna keep an eye on it and hopefully it works. Anyways, moving forward, I'm gonna continue working on the rest of the table. My plan right now is to go ahead, clean up the bottom panel here. I'm gonna get this guy cut down to the proper size, and then I'm going to start working on building everything up. And to do that, I've gone ahead and gotten a new doweling jig. My plan is to use dowels as much as possible. The lower frame, I'm still working on how I'm gonna attach it to this guy for that. Probably some screws, we'll see. But we'll get to that later. For right now, clean this guy up, dowels, let's get to it. Moving right along here. Bottom frame of the table is looking great. It's holding weight, which is awesome. I've got the bottom panel all cut to size, but I've come to the unfortunate truth that I still need to rework this top panel.
Hopefully it works.
When I tried last week to get it to flatten out on its own, soaking the top of the curved portion on this guy, unfortunately, it recupped itself. So I'm gonna have to take a little bit more of an aggressive approach on this. And my next idea to solve this issue is to build a router surfacing jig. For those that don't know, it's basically a gantry type setup that allows you to run a router across the top in repeated passes to get a surface that is flat relative to whatever your gantry router surfacing setup is. Ideally, this should work. It definitely will give me a flat face so long as I get everything set up correctly. So I'm gonna get working on the jig and we'll go from there.
And now through the magic of editing, we have a slab flattening jig. Alright, I understand why people with CNCs have dust collection. This thing is messy. Once I finally had both slabs cut to the proper size, I used a special thumbnail table edge bit in my router to give the top and bottom outer edges a soft round over.
Well, that was a longer process than I expected. But hey, the top and bottom panels are to the original thickness that I wanted, so there's that. All told, much longer process than I originally planned for. I had to go out, get some MDF to expand the table saw workbench into a full kind of flattening table. But those are all good, ready to go. I've gone over and sanded them with some 80 grit sandpaper, filled all of the gaps again as those were re-exposed in the flattening process. Can finally get back to where we were before in the assembly work. So from here, I think my plan is to start working on getting the dowel holes in place for the interior panels, to get that together, and And once that's done, I can start figuring out how I'm gonna attach this lower frame. But after setting up the assembly features, we can move on to finishing, which is really cool.
Now you may be wondering, Ryan, why are you dry fitting everything? Wouldn't you just have to take everything apart again to glue it all together? And yes, that's true, but doing a dry fit now allows me to make sure that all the dowel holes are properly aligned, fixing things if need be before everything gets covered in glue. And since I'll be painting the center, a little edge banding helps hide those unsightly plywood layers.
The end is in sight, finally. After a few off-camera work sessions, going around doing some sanding on everything, getting it nice and smooth, taking care of finishing the dowels to locate everything on this guy, we're getting really close and it's exciting. From here, my next steps are gonna be to get this guy all glued up and then move back over to the lower frame here where I'm gonna add the 4 locating dowel holes or dowels, so that way this guy can line up with that, and then I'll add some pocket hole screw locations on this lower frame. But it's super exciting to get really close. Oh man, I just want to get to staining. All right, let's get to it.
So I ended up drilling the locating dowels on the lower frame off camera, but here you can see me transferring those holes to the upper section of the table. After that, just a little sanding. Some stain, paint, and clear coat. And
at last, we've reached the end. I know this was a bit of a longer build video, but I really wanted to make sure that I conveyed just how much went into the making of this table. And while there were a lot more challenges than I initially expected in putting this guy together, I'd say we're still very happy with the final product and how well it fits in with the rest of our living room. Now, if you guys like this video, usual YouTuber spiel, please leave a like down below, really helps me out, yada, yada, yada. And before anyone asks, yes, I will have build plans for this table if you'd like to build it yourself. The link will be in the description and you can find those on my website. But I think that wraps this one up. I'll catch you guys next time.